Hi, and welcome back to this AI and C# video on the Microsoft Agent Framework and our Reasoning Deep Dive mini-series. This is the third installment of this, where we had the introduction as part 1 and OpenAI as part 2. So now we're going to look into how Google does reasoning. So we have exactly the same setup as OpenAI here, but now we're just using Google instead. And all Google's modern models, meaning 2.5 and forward, can do thinking. And they do thinking in a slightly different manner in that they are more auto-thinking and much more easy to work with. I really like the thinking approach to the Gemini approach, especially the version 3 of them. Because what I have here is I first have a baseline of Gemini 2.5 with its auto thinking on, meaning that we just create the Google Gen AI client, make the chat client, and use Gemini 2.5 Flash. We could also use the Pro model, but they work in the same manner. I'm just using it so we don't sit and wait too long. But if we do this for the Gemini and we have our question, which is the answer back in 3 words of what is the capital of France and how many people live there, in order for it to have a little of it to think about. So if we go in here and we see how is Gemini 2.5, in this case Flash, with just out of the box and nothing more. So if I press F10, we can see that it's still thinking quite a lot about it. And we can see that it used 715 tokens to do it. This is quite high, and I would definitely go in and steer this model some more, and we will see that happening a little later on. But if we do the same baseline with Gemini 3, so exactly the same code as baseline 2.5, but the only thing different being that it's now the Gemini 3 Flash version. And if we do that, and we just press F10 here to run that code, we'll see that it's much faster to answer, because it has internally figured out better that this was not a hard question. And for that reason, it didn't use a lot of reasoning. It still used some, but it didn't need to do a lot because of that. So Gemini is much more advanced or Gemini 3 is much more advanced than 2.5 when it comes to this. This is to a level where I actually think we don't really need to steer too much in general. We might want to say, oh, if it's a really, really advanced thing, but else this is sort of acceptable that we use quite a lot of output tokens for reasoning. Then if we want to actually control stuff, and in Gemini 2.5, we do that by setting something called a thinking budget. Because in OpenAI, you set low, medium, high, and so on. In 2.5, you set how many tokens you are max allowed to use. And again, we need to go into this annoying extra step of doing breaking glass way down to the raw representation factory, where we can set the generating content config. And in that, we can set config, thinking config, where we set the thinking budgets. And here we can also control, should it include the forwards back or not. So in OpenAI, it's between auto, concise, and detailed. In Google, you need to just say if you want it or not. You can't really control. There's also something called thinking level, but that is not supported by Gemini 2.5. It's only something for 3 that we will see in 1 second. So we go in and set a number here, and that number can mean different things. If you set it to -1, then it means auto, meaning the same as we saw up here without us setting anything. We can also set it to 0, meaning off, meaning it will not use any reasoning at all. Or we set it to a number higher than 0, and that would be how many tokens we max allow for reasoning. In this case, we're setting a high number, 2000. And the reason for that is if we run this and let it run, and again, it will think a lot like the first one. And let me quickly make it move down here so we can see. This ended up using more tokens than the first one, but it didn't use all the tokens. So there's still some auto reasoning in here that it says, okay, I'm allowed to use 2000, but I don't need to, because I can answer this question without using every single token at my disposal. So this just means it can max allow 2000, and it thought in this case that 1165 was the right number. And we can see the reasoning text coming back, and it works exactly the same as OpenAI. The Microsoft Agent Framework is really good at packaging this in to always go into these text reasoning contents, which is really nice. So we saw it thought a little less than OpenAI if you saw that video, but it still came back with the correct answer. If we do the same beginning to control Gemini 3, we now do it in a slightly we don't want to go into that one. We do it in a slightly different manner because now we're not setting the thinking budget, but we're setting the thinking level. We can still set the thinking budget for backwards compatibility reasons, but we are recommended not to by the Google documentation. And if we set both, it will actually produce an exception. So in Gemini 3 model family, we set this thinking level instead. And Gemini 3 Pro can only set high and low. As I read the documentation, that's we're not done yet, so they might want to have more levels at some point. But for the high level, you can only choose between high and low. While the Flash, you can set between high, low, medium, and I think it's minimal as well. So this is a nice thing to see that this is slowly going on, because it sort of shows a way toward perhaps an industry standard that these high level, medium, and so on is the way to go for an industry standard. So we also can get rid of needing to do these very, very elaborate ways of setting these values. But we're not there yet. And if I do this in high mode, we will see some interesting thing. It will take longer, but it will still take not too much longer. So if we see it went in and did its reasoning, we get our reasoning text. You can pause the video if you want to read what it thought about. And then we get our output, where we again see that despite us giving, hey, you're allowed to think a lot about this, Gemini 3 is intelligent enough to know that, yeah, I don't need to. You might have given me the allowance to do it, but I don't need to because I know the answer pretty well. So I only use a little more than we did up here. And then I was sure, I'm thinking as the model right now, and just give the answer back. So no matter how much we even steer Gemini, we still get some fairly quick answers back, which I really like. Moving on, I can do exactly the same in the Agent Framework Toolkit, and so can you if you go and grab the free NuGet packages. And it works exactly the same as we saw with OpenAI. We make a factory, in this case a Google agent factory. And to get a Google agent, we can set a thinking budget and we can have a thinking level. But again, the thinking level is not supported, or both of them at the same time is not supported. But just a more convenient way of doing exactly the same thing as we saw before. And again, I have the reasoning.get reasoning content extension method, so we don't need to sit and do all this annoying for loops as well. But we end up with exactly the same way of responding back. And the same goes for Gemini 3, where we can set the thinking level as we saw before. And it comes back fairly quickly, and we can just get our reasoning back as normal. So that's Gemini. I would say Gemini is probably the most likable way this works, and their way of trying to go to a same model as OpenAI also goes for this industry standard way. But they are really the most intelligent right now, as I see it, when it comes to reasoning, because OpenAI is more crude. You actually need to go in and say, hey, don't think so much, even on the simple questions, while Google just goes in and say, yeah, it's okay, I'm allowed to think a lot, but I don't need to. So for that reason, I would say they are in front when it comes to the reasoning now, compared to OpenAI that invented it. So that's everything for Google. In the last installment of this deep dive, are gonna show Anthropic.